Going in 12, I think.
Coach, appreciate you doing this. We sat down 2 years ago. I was just talking. Can you believe
Has it been 2 years?
It's been 2 years, yeah. Can you believe it's been 12 years now here at Penn State?
Yeah, I can believe it. In some ways, it's sad though, right? Like that's pretty unusual now in today's college football. So I take a lot of pride in it. I'm not necessarily a mover and a shaker, and I don't think Penn State's used to that either. I think Penn State likes stability.
Yeah, I feel like really in those last 2 years since I've been here with you and sat down last time is this program has gone from, you talked a lot about great to elite. And I feel like you've crossed into that. This is an elite program in college football now. I mean, you make the college football playoff for the first time in program history and a play away from the national championship game. And I feel like you've gone from the hunter to the hunted in college football. How does being the hunted change the internal drive or the internal motivation that you have?
Well, I don't know if that has changed a whole lot. I think the first thing that we've done is we've been consistent, right? You look what we've been able to do over the last 2 to 3 years, but then really 6 of our last 9. I don't think there's been this level of consistency at Penn State since the late 70s, early 80s. So we take a lot of pride in that. But in a lot of ways, the playoff dynamic really changed things as much as anything, because we talked about this before. If it had been the 12-team playoff, we would have benefited from that as much as anybody, right? So I think, to be honest with you, with our schedule and our conference, we've been part of that hunted group for a while. So I don't see a whole lot has changed with that. I think the biggest thing that we've talked about in the past is just the difference of leadership at the presidential position, the difference in leadership with Pat Kraft, our athletic director. There's just so many more yeses that we're getting that used to be no's. And they add up, and as we know, the margin of error is small. So I think that's probably the biggest dynamic change that I've seen.
What are the ways that this job has changed the most in the last few years? Obviously, you have the portal, you have NIL, you have revenue sharing coming now soon that I know you're having to manage. You have the administration changes at Penn State. How do you feel like it's changed the most in the last couple of years?
Well, I think the other thing that's strange, right, is yesterday our compliance guy said, well, hey, I want to come in and do our compliance trainings before we go out on the road recruiting to go over the rules. And I'm like, what rules?
What are the rules?
What are the rules? Let's understand that. So, yeah, I just think the NIL and transfer portal combination is a beast, right? And for me, I'm still an old school believer in the collegiate experience and what it's done for both of us and thousands of people across our country, student athletes. So I am fighting with everything I got to make sure that our Penn State program is transformational and not transactional. But I will tell you, like, it's hard. And a little piece of you dies every time a transactional interaction happens, right? Like yesterday, I had a young man come in, wants to go into the transfer portal, states all these reasons why. And I'm like, well, I haven't heard from you once about any of these reasons until you're already telling me you're going into the transfer portal. And just because I care so much about the kids and their journey and their experience, and what I know, you know this better than anybody, what the Penn State experience can do for them over the next 50 years, I'm battling it. And I think there's an aspect that it's transactional whether I battle it or not, but I still want it to be as transformational as we possibly can be here at Penn State.
Well, what are the ways that you try to do that? Is it just over communication with the players? Is it making sure everyone knows where they stand? Because at the end of the day, you also have to make business decisions about your roster that on a day-to-day basis.
Yes, but here's the deal. If you start treating the players strictly business, then they're going to return that in your direction. And we still have a ton of players. Like, let's be honest. If it's just about money, you're always going to be able to find somebody that can pay you a little bit more.
Yeah.
So there's got to be that relationship and that feeling that I love being at Penn State. I'm having a great experience. I'm creating value for myself in a lot more ways than just what shows up in the paycheck. I hate to use that term, but a lot of ways that's really what it is, right? So, and then it's talking about it. You know, I talk about that with the leadership council. I talk about that with the team after our last game in the locker room. I talked about that we're one of the few programs left in college football that is still transformational and holding as tight to that as we possibly can be.
Yeah. Your hire of Jim Knowles this offseason. When the job first came open, I made a graphic of the top candidates that I thought would be for the Penn State job. I put Jim Knowles number 1. I got berated on social media.
Yeah.
Destroyed. I mean, people were calling me the biggest homer of all time. And I had no inside knowledge at the time of that. Obviously a massive hire, probably the best coordinator in the country that you got to leave a great program to come here. At what moment did you realize, or did you think that was going to be a possibility, and how'd you actually get it done?
So first of all, I want to say I think we have arguably the best staff in college football and arguably the 3 best coordinators in college football. And I will tell you, you know, and I think a lot of times when you say these things, people don't necessarily believe you, but I had talked to probably 6 to 8 coordinators in the NFL as well as in college, and we're trying to find the right fit. And some of those didn't go very far, and some of those went, you know, fairly far into the process. But then I got a call right after the national championship game, and it moved quick. And, you know, Jim had come out here when he was at Duke and spent some time with us for a couple days. I had forgotten about that, to be honest with you, and that was helpful. Yeah. We had some conversations when he went to Ohio State the first time. We had some conversations on that end, but I didn't think it was an option, you know, and then once they got done playing and a couple of my other conversations didn't go the way, you know, that I had hoped, or maybe the candidate had hoped, and then here this situation presented itself. And then the reality is, under the old leadership, under the old regime, it wouldn't have happened. Yeah. Because not only do you have the best defense coordinator in college football available, but Ohio State's trying to keep them. Yeah. Notre Dame has an opening. Oklahoma has an opening. We have an opening. Yeah. So it creates a challenging situation when you're trying to get the deal done. But this would not have happened under the old regime. Yeah. So I think it shows another example of commitment to winning at the highest level here.
Yeah. How, like, when you call Pat Kraft and you're like, hey, I think we can get Jim Knowles, I'm assuming, knowing Pat, that he gets all fired up and is like in the trenches with you. How do we get it done? Is that how it goes down?
Well, yeah, there's a little bit more, right?
Yeah.
I think this is real, but it's gonna mean X. It's gonna take X. Yeah. And can we do that? You know, can we make that happen? And you know, his initial reaction was good, but he said, let me get back to you. Got back to me and said, let's make a run at this thing. So, as you know, Pat is a foxhole guy, right? Yeah. You know, I think that's why Kale loves him. I think that's why all the coaches in the athletic department, because you feel like you got a partner with you in this journey. And I think that's important for all of us, right? That people that we work with, that you feel like are right in the thick of it with you. Not always perfect, but I think that's a powerful position to be in, specifically as a head football coach.
Yeah. Of all the impressive things you've done here in your time, I think one of the most impressive is how you've developed guys that have stayed in this program that's so rare in college football. I mean, and then you talk about this season, like getting Drew Allar and Katron Allen and Nick Singleton. I mean, if you would have told me all 3 of those guys were coming back at the end of last year, I wouldn't have even believed it, right? And to be sitting here, and clearly that comes from relationships and that these guys trust you and trust this program and want to be here. how do you actually make that happen, where you keep some of these players here for a long period of time when it seems like they're not going to stay or will go to the NFL? And what do you attribute it to? Is it the relationship piece?
Yeah, and Deny.
Yeah, so
and
many more.
Zane
Yeah.
and Zachy, right? I think it's the culture that we've built here, right? There's a culture of, like we talked about, a transformational relationship, a true relationship where they know I care about them and their futures. The reality is, every single player on our roster is probably walking away from a little bit of money because they appreciate what this experience is like, and it has to be that way. Yeah. And I think, when you look at transfer portal, knock on wood, because it's not over yet, but we're averaging about 4 to 6 guys a year, and some programs are averaging 46 a year. Yeah. So I think it's a little bit of the relationships, or a lot of the relationships, and what you talked about, and their experience, and them and their parents valuing that experience. But it's also, I think, a philosophy. Some programs, which I totally get, are saying that we're going to spend all of our resources in the transfer portal, and we're going to try to retain our roster, number one, guys that we know, guys that we have developed. The transfer portal is great, but you don't typically know exactly what you've gotten until they show up, and that's a little scary. Yeah.
Revenue sharing is coming to college sports, and it seems like any moment now. And I'm sure that you've been doing a lot of research on how, it's essentially a salary cap NFL model, and how you actually break up the money between quarterback and defensive end and left tackle. And what are the ways you're preparing for revenue sharing in this staff? We're going to talk to Andy Frank later, who I know is your general manager, about how you guys are preparing for it. But how have you prepped for that to come to college sports?
Yeah, I think the first thing is the point you just made. Having Andy Frank as our general manager has been with me the whole time, all the way back to Vanderbilt. So he's been with me over 15 years, going on 16 years, I think. It helps that he has a engineering degree from Princeton, similar to a psychology degree from East Stroudsburg, right?
Yeah, same sphere.
But then studying it, right? Like, how does the NFL put it? The money that they have, how do they break it up, and to what positions? Those things are important. But then also, again, if you're a developmental program, making sure that, okay, these high-end guys that are leaving, that we feel like we got that next group that are going to slide into these types of roles. Talking to a lot of other colleges that you feel like you have relationships with that maybe aren't in the footprint, that you don't necessarily compete with for recruits and things like that. That's helpful to have those types of relationships. And then obviously the NFL, talking to guys in the NFL, talking to people in Major League Baseball, all these different resources that have been through it. There's value in all those types of things.
Yeah. Such a critical piece of this whole thing is evaluation of players and knowing who you actually want to bring in these doors, right, into this program. And you'd mentioned, I've heard you talk before about the transfer portal, and the hard part is you got to move so quickly with the kids that you sometimes don't have a chance to look at their background. I'm curious, are there any non-negotiables that you have where you guys say as a staff, hey, if there's anything on the background that's this, we're not touching it? Or are there anything that, from a positive standpoint, that you look at, length, speed, what are the things where you say, we're taking the guessing work out of this thing, if these are the non-negotiables we need for a player in this program?
Yeah, so I guess for us, like you talked about, we want guys that have as many traits as possible in terms of height, weight, speed, production on film, physicality, those types of things. But some of these programs will not take a guy unless they have a specific measurement. Yeah. And we're not that rigid, because I think there are exceptions that we have seen at the highest level in the NFL. Bob Sanders, or you can go on and on with examples, right? But where you have to be careful is, okay, you're going to take one exception. You can't take more than that per room. And then in terms of red flags that we would say no on, I don't think there's one specific one that jumps out to us. As you know, this is a pretty strict school and a school that's, I would say, risk averse in a lot of ways. So we're not going to do a whole lot of that. But I think in general, my message to the staff all the time and a reminder for myself is, let's not get intoxicated with talent and talent alone.
Yeah.
There's red flags. You got to be willing to see the red flags. It's not just the GPA. Look on the transcript. How many tardies are there? How many absences are there? Yeah. When you're talking to other coaches in the area, what are they saying about the prospect? When you're talking to a kid in the hallway at a school, a non-football player, what are they saying? There's enough information. You're sitting with a young man in his office. How is he sitting there? What's his eye contact? What's his body language like? How respectful is he to his parents? So there's red flags. You got to be willing to see them and not just be intoxicated by the talent.
Yeah. One of the biggest groups that watches my podcast religiously is young coaches that want to break into college football, that want to be a head coach someday. It's such a big part of your job is evaluating young coaches, finding young coaches that you want to bring into this program. What are the things that you look for when you're watching a young coach operate, or you're saying, hey, is this a guy that could be a position coach for us?
Well, I think the first thing is I'd make a compliment to you. Like, I enjoy doing these interviews because I think you have really good perspective and I think you ask great questions.
Thank you.
And that's not always the case. So it doesn't make for enjoyable interviews sometimes. But I think for me, I think curiosity is a really important trait, right? Somebody that is curious about a lot of different things, wants to grow, wants to evolve, is a lifelong learner. Once you think you got this thing figured out in this profession, that's when your career's going in the tank. You got to constantly be trying to learn and get better. That's one of the reasons why I love this time of year, because on the off days, we lift with one group and then meet with the other. So when the defense is lifting, the offense is meeting, and then we flip it on the off days, which is great because it creates opportunities for our offensive coaches to sit in all the defensive meetings and vice versa. That's really valuable for professional growth, and we encourage that. But I think the other thing is you're going to work 16 hours with people. You got to make sure you're bringing the right people in. And just like, a lot of professions, it's a smaller world than people realize. So, we typically are able to hire people that either we know or somebody that I know that loves Penn State or loves James Franklin and that I can call and they're going to tell me the truth and vouch for this person and put their name on it. Like, one of the most ridiculous things is call my references. Why am I going to call your references? They're going to say wonderful things about you. I want to call people that know you and know me and what we're looking for and what would be a great fit. So that's been, I think, really, really helpful for us. And then again, having the support from the administration that not only can you identify them, we've been able to identify people in the past, but then you can't go hire them. Now we're able to go hire them.
Is the whole, you keeping a list at every position of coaches, is that a true thing? You keep a list of every spot?
Yeah, and it's a constant running list. So like Will Ryman, Moneyball in our organization, we call him Moneyball. That's his job. He keeps the list for me. So if I read something, if I see something, if I watch one of your shows and I was impressed by an interview, I'll shoot him a name. And then we kind of add him to the list. We start tracking his data and how he produces, how he is as a recruiter. Or I'm out recruiting. I'm at McDonough High School in Baltimore, and all of a sudden I interact with another coach.
That was pretty good.
And I like how he carried himself. I watched how he interacted with the high school coach and how he dressed and how he represented the school. Then I'll jot those things down. Or we're playing somebody this week, and I'm really impressed with the D-line and how they played. I'm really impressed with the coordinator and how they managed the game. So we're constantly, putting names down there, and then over time, I'm at the convention, I have opportunity to grab a lunch, a dinner, or breakfast with somebody. I'm going to try to do that as well.
Yeah. One of the things I remember from when I played for you here for a couple of years, but just watching you since then, is how detailed you are in everything, and how it's kind of taught me that like everything matters. Everything from how you guys are playing defense on third down to like the cleanliness of the bathrooms and all those little things that also like average people wouldn't think about. What's an example of something that you feel like you're like obsessed with in this program that most people would never think that a head coach would, be thinking about that kind of stuff? Real quick, guys, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor on this podcast, Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best way to fire on sports. I've tried all the different apps, sports books, daily fantasy. Prize Picks is the way. On Prize Picks, you're picking players instead of teams. So if you know sports like I do, you can make a bunch of money, especially with the free $50 bonus with code NEXTUP or the link in my description. All you gotta do is deposit $5. You get a free $50 in your account that you can use, go 10X, 100X, turn it into whatever you want. Code NEXTUP, $50 bonus, link in description. Let's go. What's an example of something that you feel like you're like obsessed with in this program that most people would never think that a head coach would, be thinking about that kind of stuff?
Well, I think the biggest thing is I'm kind of obsessed with everything. And that's where it's so important to hire good people, because like my thing is, I'm going to tell you when I hire you, I'm a micromanager, right? And I think as long as people are honest with you on the front end, then this is what you signed up for, right? You can't complain on the back end. But my thing is, I'm going to be a micromanager and I'm going to be obsessed until the person has showed me that they're going to do the job at a level that we need it done. Then I'm going to walk away, because let's be honest, I can't be running all the different departments. So that's where hiring really good people is very important. And then at that point, you let them run with it. But I think the thing that probably over the last 10 years that I've really tried to spend my time as the head coach is, how can we create the best teaching environments? How can we create the best learning environments? And when I can see a PowerPoint, or when I can give feedback to a assistant coach or a coordinator at the end of a meeting on something he may have considered. We've brought teaching specialists, people that go around the country and teach you how to be the best teacher possible, and videotape our classrooms or videotape our meeting rooms and give us feedback of how we can grow. That's probably the thing that I've really kind of clung on to in the last couple of years, of how can we create the best environment for teaching and learning as possible, because ultimately we're overpaid phys ed teachers, right? That's what we are.
Well, I was going to ask you the next question of, I've heard you talk before about studying leadership and studying different leaders, whether it be CEOs, other head coaches. How do you study leadership now? How are you constantly evolving as a head coach to improve your leadership style?
I think the thing that I think is helpful is videos. That's where your broadcasts are valuable. That's where I still will dabble with social media, because I can find stuff that I really like, or I'll pull off a video. I thought the video of Coach Gruden speaking at Wisconsin I saw the other day, I thought it was a really good speech. And in that video, he talked about communication and how critical that is on the defensive side of the ball. Well, I've been sitting in Coach Knowles' defensive meetings, unit meetings, and he's been hammering communication. So I use that video to show the entire team and then reinforce something that Coach Knowles is saying, right? So I think those are helpful, and they're quick and they're easy, right? But then obviously, in the summers, reading, getting whether it's a leadership book or whether it's a management book or whatever it may be, and picking a book or two. And then I'll typically buy that for the staff and give it to them before they go on vacation to read. Now, I don't know.
They're reading it?
I don't know if it's happening, but I think those are areas that I try to get better. I think TED Talks and things like that are valuable. The videos are helpful.
Yeah. Your TED Talk was at 2015, 2014? That was a great one.
Early on here.
I've used it a few times in speeches I've given. I've copied your TED Talk. It's pretty good.
Well, I appreciate it. It's funny because I'll have recruits or someone reach out and say, hey, my teacher just showed your TED Talk in my class. So
that's cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
With all the things going on in college football at Penn State right now, has there been a moment recently where it's been hey, this is why I love doing this job? Anything that comes to mind?
Well, I'll be honest, right? The best time of my day is the 2 hours on the field running around with the guys. And I think that's one of the things that's cool. You know this. We have 20 former Penn State football players on our staff, which I am so proud of, right? Because Penn Staters take care of Penn Staters. But I think they're really impressed with the culture now, where the program is at, and my interactions with the players interaction with me. That's gold, because I'm gonna be honest with you, the other 14 hours is not the case. And I have to remind myself of that because it's become more transactional than I would like. Again, a little piece of me dies every time that happens. So to remind myself of why I do it and make sure that my interaction with one or two that's negative doesn't impact my relationship with the other 118, because it shouldn't. But if you're not careful, it will.
Yeah. Well, what are the ways that you feel like you've changed as a head coach from, I was taught since back in 2014 when I sat in one of those chairs right over there. Like, what if I was in your team meeting now versus 2014? What would be different?
Well, I think early on, when I was really trying to get the culture and the standards in place, I was probably less flexible, right? I was really trying to make sure that everybody understood what the standards were, how we were going to operate, how we were going to function. And let's be honest, a lot of it has to do with the leader you follow and what his style is. Not that one style is right and one style is wrong, just different. And that's hard for players, especially as young men. So I just think I've always been a relational leader, but I think more relational than ever. And I think the seniors and the juniors and most of the sophomores, they get it now. Like the freshmen, I mess with them and they're not totally sure when I'm kidding and when I'm being serious with them, and which is probably good, right? But with the vets, we got a really good relationship, and they know there's a line they can't cross, and I'm going to hold them accountable. But it is very relational, and that's probably the thing that drives me the most, and probably empowers me. Being able to. I'm gonna fly to go with Tyler Warren and his family in the afternoon, have lunch with them, and then fly to Green Bay with Abdul for the draft, and right, that's awesome, right? But also calling the other guys that are going to get drafted, all throughout the draft or sign free agent contracts. I want to make sure that all those guys understand how much I appreciate them and how excited I am for their futures. Yeah.
Thinking back to that first few years, and I know it was a long time ago, so I don't want to harp on it too much, but I always think about that time because of it was just such a crazy time in Penn State college football history. There was so much, even I think about the locker room at the time and how you got guys who had played for Joe Paterno and then Bill O'Brien and had stayed during the sanctions, but there was definitely a wall put up in the locker room, right? Yes. It was like everyone on the outside doesn't know what we've been through. Yep. For right or for wrong, young kids, I think that happened. And it's interesting that you said, you kind of had to be rigid in the standard of, hey, this is how it's going to be. And I always respected that about you. It seemed like from day one, you knew how you wanted to do things. And the good or the bad, we lost to Temple one year. But after the Temple game, you came in here and it was the same exact thing, right? You weren't doubting anything about the process. Do you remember that time?
Yeah, I
probably vividly, right?
Yeah. Probably more so than I would like. And I think, again, you understand it in ways that others can't, right? There's a high school coach named Matt Ortega, is the head coach at Coatesville High School. And I remember he went to Temple's spring practice and went to ours. And he came and he said, Temple looked a lot better than you guys. And I said this to him the other day, and he's like, I remember that. That was kind of like a wake-up call. But I think, you just think about how the program has evolved and how much pride that I take in that. And I hope guys like yourself take in that. But I also think at the time, maybe as a player, you didn't understand.
No doubt, yeah.
And I think now that, you're one of the experts in college football because you're able to travel the country, when you think about we had 5 offensive linemen in the entire program, there's some significant challenges. So I think when you take all those things into consideration, I'm very, very proud of what we've created here, but also totally own what we have to do moving forward.
Yeah. How do you balance from your seat what maybe the fans or outside people want versus what the program actually needs? And sometimes they're not always aligned, right?
Yeah.
How do you? I mean, I know you're going to do what the program needs, but it's a lot to balance.
Yeah, and I think the other challenge with that is the fans' perception can impact others.
Yeah,
it can impact the administration's feelings. It can impact your staff and your players' feelings because they're hearing it, right? So, and at a place like Penn State, when we have 107,000 fans showing up to every single game, another 100,000 fans tailgating, maybe having a better time than the people in the stadium, let's be honest. It's hard to turn that off.
Yeah.
You go to Starbucks or you go to McDonald's and you're in line and everybody within a couple hours of this campus is talking about Penn State football. So it is impactful, but I think that's to your point when you're able to go to Vanderbilt and do the things that we were able to do, that the plan and the model works, right? Now there's things that we have to tweak and adjust to Penn State, but it makes you very grounded in your beliefs, and you've been through those types of fires. So I think that's more important than it's ever been because you got to tune all that other stuff out and do what is right for the program. But you can't know what's right without making sure that you're hearing from all these different constituents.
Yeah.
And the fans are part of that. Let's be honest. The athletic director is part of that. The team, most importantly, is part of it, the players and the staff. And then once you have all that information, then you can say, okay, this is in our best interest, and this is what we have to do moving forward.
Yeah. On that note, do you ever feel like the work you put in here hasn't been fully appreciated or seen for what it is by maybe the fans, maybe national college football media?
Yeah, but let's be honest, nobody gives a shit, right? Nobody cares, right? I think the real football people that understand the time we came to Penn State and what we've been able to do and the level of consistency that we have played with over the last 9 years, I think people respect that on a national scale. Why is Brent Pry at Virginia Tech? That's part of that, right? Why is Ricky Ronnie at Old Dominion? Why did Joe Moorhead leave here to go to Mississippi State? Like, people respect what we've done here. But again, I want to make sure whenever I say that I also understand that I am going to be viewed, we are going to be viewed, Drew, the quarterback, Allar is going to be viewed by a few games a year. And we totally embrace that and totally respect that. And you better, when you take the Penn State job, that comes with that.
Yeah. With all the things you have going on, when you lay your head down at night, what's the thing that keeps you up the most?
Yeah, it's really the things, I don't want to be repetitive, but it's really the things we've talked about.
Yeah.
I think at first it's NIL, and at first it's the transfer portal, but more than that, it goes back to the relationships. When I feel like I'm losing an opportunity to impact a young man in a positive way, and I know that this program and my coaching staff is the best place for this young man to be developed long term. But when some kids and some families are in situations where they can't really think long term or they're not thinking long term and they're looking at the short term and that clouds everything else, that's challenging. So that kind of breaks my heart because I know long term this is the best place for him.
Yeah. I wanted to ask about Drew Allar, and his development's been amazing over the last few years, and now returns as if not the best, one of the best quarterbacks in college football. What have you seen from him just over the last few months of, being here now, like undisputed, played extremely well, but I'm sure there's still things that you want him to get better at. How do you evaluate him right now and how he's been the last few months?
Yeah, again, very similar to what we talked about the program, right? His freshman year, really starting all the way back to as a recruit, right? When, he's kind of an old school throwback recruit where he just kind of kept moving up the rankings and getting better and better. Did the same thing his freshman year. Took a significant step his sophomore year in terms of understanding the offense, knowing how to get the playmakers the ball, eliminating negative plays and protecting the football. He's done that as good as pretty much any quarterback in the country. Leadership, being a leader by example, and then working more of a vocal leader last year and continuing to grow in these areas. And then also, again, back to what we just got done talking about, the head coach and the quarterback better have thick skin, because there's loud voices, and the loud voices are usually the minority, but they're real loud. And he's grown in all those areas. And I see him doing the same things right now, taking steps in all these areas for this year, for us to have the type of year that he wants us to have, and for him to have the type of year that he wants to have.
This program obviously is, as we talked about, on the doorstep of the summit, of the top of the top of the top. What do you think's the final couple steps that need to happen to win a national championship?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, and we've done a great job of this, and it kind of goes back to your point earlier that everything matters, right? And I think early on in the program, we would pick and choose the things that we would compete in. It was like, well, we don't need facilities. Well, everybody else needs them, right? And we were able to get those things done. And I think early on it was, NIL. Well, that's not really kind of in our culture. We don't do those things. So I think we're at a point now where Pat's done a really good job, where I felt like before maybe it was me pounding that drum by myself, and Pat being very supportive and understanding for us to go where we want to go, that we have to compete in everything. We got to have the best coordinators. We got to have the best coaches. We got to have the best players. We got to be able to capitalize, when we have momentum. I think those things are really what has changed and what is critical for us moving forward, to make sure that we're not rationalizing, and that every area that we need to compete in, we're competing at the highest level. So those things show up consistently on Saturdays.
From an NIL standpoint, how do you feel like support has been? I was involved in some of it, trying to help and support a long journey to get to where it needed to be, and probably still not even where it needs to be. How do you feel like the NIL support has been over the last couple of years and where it's at right now?
Yeah, so first couple of years, we had work to do, right? And I think especially in Pat's last 2 years, we've really made a move in those areas, and from help from guys like yourself and others and donors and Letterman and the community as well. I think this community really understands the importance of a healthy Penn State football for everybody, right? So we've made tremendous strides. Obviously, every time you get to a level, the needle moves. So we have to constantly stay aggressive, and we can't take a deep breath and be like, okay, we've arrived, we've made the playoffs, we've retained our roster. You got to constantly be pushing because the needle's constantly moving.
One of my favorite clips of you is your press conference. I forget when it was, but when someone said, I forget what school they said, but their NIL budget's $12 million. What's yours need to be? You're like, well, it needs to be $12 million.
Right. Yeah, that question never made sense to me, and that thinking never made sense. But that goes back to kind of what we're talking about, right? You can't say, well, we're Penn State, so we don't need this. We need the same things that everybody else has for us to be competing at the highest level year in and year out, Saturday after Saturday.
Last question for you, Coach. I appreciate all your time. When you leave this place someday, it's probably a long time from now still, what do you hope people remember about James Franklin?
Well, I think it's the complete picture, right? I hope it's the complete picture. You know, back to what you talked about, the level of consistency, how our guys conducted themselves in interviews and in the community representing the greater Penn State, how our guys are equipped to go on and be leaders in their communities and fathers and husbands. And I think that's what is so special about this Penn State brotherhood is people coming back from 50 years ago and 40 years ago and 30 years ago. So I hope people feel like that I leave it better than I found it, and that I was able to maximize the potential of this place, the people, the town, the history, the tradition. And I hope people feel like that I represented the program the right way on a daily basis, on a yearly basis.
And a national champion?
And a national champion, there's no doubt. And to be honest with you, once we get one, then it's going to like, stop talking about that one, let's get the next one, right? It'll never be enough.
What have you done for me lately, right?
That's exactly right.
Coach, appreciate your time.
Thank
appreciate
you.
You as always, man.
You
Thank
as well.
Next up.